Welcome back to The Healing Habit, where we talk about the importance of healing and how to make it a part of your everyday life. I'm your host, Cassie Sharp,
And I'm Renatha Lollis.
and today we're going to be talking about step one of the forgiveness model, which is acknowledging the offense. Renatha, I'm so excited to hear what you have to say about this today.
Well, it's interesting. This is one of the things when we talk about forgiveness that seems really, really easy, right? We should be able to articulate what happened and acknowledge whatever the offense is or whatever the experience is. But in reality, it's actually kind of complex. That when we are thinking about what we've experienced, especially in the context of attempting to forgive it, when we are sort of engaging with what happened, we can find ourselves connecting the dots of a current experience with something that happened in the past.
Right.
So we want to be able to separate and isolate what we're experiencing in the moment and acknowledging the right thing so that we can indeed forgive the right thing.
Yeah.
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 So it is a part of the process to really sort of sit back and examine what happened. So let's say, for instance, you had a conversation with a friend, and in having this conversation, you shared some things that were really, really private, really, really intimate. And a few days later, you're having a conversation with another acquaintance, and they mention some of the things that you shared in confidence with friend A.
Mhm.
So, as friend B is telling you about what friend A shared with them, in that moment, you are starting to have some feelings of betrayal.
Mhm.
And those emotions can then lead you to feel embarrassed. So there's shame. And then stepping away from that conversation, you start to feel even more emotions. You start to feel anger and disappointment. So now you've got this entire sort of soup of emotions and feelings that you're dealing with. And as you recognize that, you are the person who's being impacted by these emotions, there then comes a point where you have to establish what really happened.
Mhm.
But as you start to think about what you experienced, you realize that you have all of these feelings and emotions about this experience that might not necessarily just be about that singular experience. Because as you start to consider, this reminds you of another experience you had 2 years prior where someone you trusted betrayed your confidence. And as you start to look at this, you realize, well, wait a minute, I'm not just responding on what happened with person A, but I'm responding to something that happened 2 years ago as well. And as you're trying to process through forgiveness, it's important for you to realize what you're actually engaging with and what you're actually forgiving so that you can move forward.
Right. I mean, that is so, I think, beneficial to recognize and realize that, like, when we're interacting with one person, it's just that person and that singular offense. And I think a lot of times we have a tendency to even hold an offense from the same person, but from a couple years ago. We
Yeah.
might say, oh, well, you did the same thing 1 year ago. And I think recognizing, hey, like, we're dealing with that singular offense right now. That other offense is in the past. We can't, should we say that we can't even, like, re-acknowledge that? Like, is there like a, I guess, a statute of limitations with an offense? Like, because I've heard, like, even in relationships, that if you didn't talk about it at the time of the offense, it shouldn't be something that is contributing to the conversation now. Like, you can't just use it to your advantage when it's beneficial to you. You know what I mean?
That's a really, really great question.
Yeah.
So it's important for us all to remember that we are the sum of our experiences, right?
Right.
So it isn't just that the one thing that's happening now, but we're filtering all of our information through the things that we've experienced in our past. So let's go back to the example that I use, and hopefully I'll be able to answer your question.
Yeah.
Tell me if I don't.
Okay.
So using that first example, when the person who's been betrayed by person A and has been exposed by person B, when they go back and evaluate and they find out that it was from a relationship that happened to or an experience that happened 2 years ago, there's this invitation in that moment to evaluate whether or not you've properly healed and forgiven from what happened 2 years ago.
Mm.
And with that invitation, not only are you acknowledging what happened now, but you're going to go back, or there is an invitation for you to go back to heal what happened 2 years ago. Healing that scenario from the past doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go back to that person in the past, because this is your own internal process.
Right.
This it doesn't necessarily have to involve that person in the past.
Mhm.
You're making the decision to say, "You know what? I don't like the fact that this is living rent free in my head, that
Yeah.
I'm being impacted by something that happened 2 years ago." So
Mhm.
in the moment, you can say, "You know what? I'm choosing to release them. I'm going to forgive them. I'm going to let that go. Now I can deal with what's happening in the moment."
Mhm.
So let's talk about it in terms of relationship. So you mentioned being in relationship with someone and they have a behavior that reminds you of something that they had done previously. And you think like, wait, you've already done this before. And so that belief of I can't revisit this because I didn't bring it up in the moment. That kind of depends. So, when this happened in the past, did we talk about it? Were we able to process it together? And if we were able to process it together, did I say that I had forgiven you? And if I did say that I had forgiven you, I don't think that it's fair for you to bring that back up in the past, because this is my internal issue.
Mhm.
So you, as the person who's been injured, have a responsibility to revisit your own internal processes. And the other person isn't mandatory. They don't have to be involved in what I am doing internally to manifest or to move forward in my own healing.
Yeah.
So, but if that is something that you haven't talked about, if you haven't had a conversation, if you all haven't processed it, then it's absolutely reasonable to be able to say, I'm noticing a pattern in your behavior.
Mhm.
Can we talk about this? Because this happened in the past. Now it's happening again. So can we sit down and kind of talk about this?
Right.
So it's absolutely reasonable, but it is going to depend on what has happened in the communication previously.
Yeah. Wow. I'm have so many thoughts running through my head because I remember from our last conversation, this was so impactful talking about all of the steps of the forgiveness model. And specifically thinking about how it's a lot easier to run than it is to like actually go through all of these steps. And I've been noticing even in conversations with other people, they're asking me like, why are you putting effort into this, or like why are you staying in this situation? And I'm pulling from that conversation and being
Yeah.
like, well, I think that it would be easy to say that in situations like this I just wanna run every single time that something becomes uncomfortable,
Yes.
and, the question really is, are we putting everything that we can into resolving that situation even on an internal level? And part of that is just kind of acknowledging and really being willing to sit with all of the thoughts that are going through your head, because I think a lot of times we don't want to relive what happened in the past.
Mhm.
So there's like this door with all of these feelings that are trying to like recirculate, and we're just like, the best thing I can do is shut that door and pretend like it doesn't exist.
Right.
And I think it's important to actually acknowledge that stuff, whether that's sitting down with a journal and like really processing through every single thought that's coming into your mind. I know last time we spoke about this, we were also talking about um the just fact versus feeling,
Mhm.
because I think a lot of times our feelings kind of lie to us, and they say, well, that person, based off of my experience in the past, that person meant to do this, and I know that this was their intention. And kind of just revolving around, I guess, a spiral
Yeah.
of these lies that you're believing because of your feeling. How do you determine between fact and feeling?
Well, I wanna put a pin in that question
There's
because
so many things,
I
right?
guess, but I wanna go back because you said something that's
Yes.
that's really, really important, because people are talking about how it seems easier to avoid some of these conflicts, or,
Yeah.
why are you investing so
Yes.
much in trying to heal these things? And I wanna acknowledge that because many people feel that. Many people think, like, it's not worth it. So why don't you just take those feelings, put them in the room, shut the door, and move on? Here's the truth. In the moment, it seems easier. And in the moment, it feels like an easier thing to do to avoid these issues, to
Yes.
kick the can down the road or to ignore it altogether. It seems easier. But here's what happens: the more we avoid having these conversations, the easier it becomes. And if am able to isolate myself from you and close the door here with one person, the second time I have a conflict is easier for me to close that door. And then the third time it becomes easier and easier and easier. And what we end up doing is creating a life where we no longer learn how to be in relationship with people, how to deal with challenges, and we become isolated, and we train our brain that it is not safe to build lasting connection because hurt is going to be on the horizon.
Mhm.
And so we stop being able to build meaningful relationships because we take what we think is the easier path. In turn, as we continue to move forward in a relationship, what we then find is that all of that avoidance is pushing and suppressing these feelings and emotions. And we are constantly now trying to navigate this minefield of emotionality that we've created in our life because we've never developed the resilience to deal with conflict.
Mm.
So we think it's easier in the short run, but actually it simply creates more problems in the future.
Yeah.
So as we learn how to deal with these conflicts, as we learn how to have tough conversations and invest in relationship, it makes us better, stronger, more connected to our environments, and we're better people. We're better friends. We are better partners, and we have the ability to be able to bounce back. We become stronger mentally, emotionally, and spiritually when we step into the conflict rather than always avoiding it.
Yeah.
Make
Wow.
sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it's so good and also so hard cuz I know when someone's hurt me even more than once, and I know people who they give less chances. I'm kind of like, I don't think I'd want to even try to be your friend anymore.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be your friend anymore. Like it's hard because I know we say like cutting a person out should be like the very last step. But it's also hard when the desire to be friends with that person doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Well, so it is about understanding what we talked about in the previous episode, the investment you've made in that relationship. And it is being willing to say, is this something worth moving forward in? Now, let's be clear. When we acknowledge the offense, when we understand and are aware of what this person has done to us, we still have the right to determine what that relationship looks like. The issue, though, isn't whether or not that person should be a part of our life. The issue is whether or not I'm willing to heal from what was done.
Mm,
And as I'm stepping into this process of forgiveness, I am choosing me. I am choosing my own emotional health. And I'm saying that it is better for me to not allow these unresolved emotions to continue to live daily in my life,
yeah.
but to seek out healing. And here's the another thing that's really important is that what we extend to other people is what we would want someone to extend to us.
Mhm.
Because oftentimes when we're making the decision to sever a relationship because someone hurt us, we're not thinking about the people that we hurt.
Mm,
We're not thinking about the ways in which we show up in the world where we may respond in a way that might not be loving and kind. And it goes back to that golden rule. Doing unto others is we want people to do unto us. And that's
yes.
something that we learn in first grade, right?
Mhm.
We learn the importance of extending to other people what we want extended to us.
Yeah.
So when we make these decisions and we're evaluating someone's behavior, it is important that we do this in context.
Yeah.
How would I want someone to see how I respond?
Yeah.
How would I want someone to treat me if I made this
Yeah.
mistake? And then extending to those people what we would desire for someone to extend to us.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking too about how there are different scenarios that would cause like a painful interaction with somebody. For example, like you could be catching somebody on a bad day. You could be catching somebody who's quite literally going through it. Like
Yeah.
they have family members in the hospital, just like, so their interaction with you, maybe even on a consistent level, is not normal to who they really are.
Yes.
And so recognizing the offense, but also sometimes it can't be acknowledged to the person because of that kind of thing. Like you need to pause and wait until they're in a better place or a healthier place. And kind of not allowing yourself to be like a doormat, but also not necessarily holding them, I wouldn't say holding them accountable, but, like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
having a hard time putting this into words, but because this is something that I feel like is that we go through, that we
Yeah.
deal with, you know?
Well, it's this tension of grace and compassion,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
So being able to understand that as we're walking through life and we're having these experiences, yes, having a bad day is real.
Yeah.
Yes, dealing with the stress of life and the challenges that come with that are going to have an impact on how we connect with each other. So as we are walking through the process of acknowledging the offense, taking into consideration the totality of this person. They are not what they have done in this moment,
Right.
but they are the sum of who they are.
Right.
So yes, someone can be having a response that isn't typical, and those things need to be a part of how you are evaluating and responding to acknowledging the offense.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to the statement that you made about dealing with facts and feelings,
Okay.
like being able to because I think
Yeah.
that
It
dovetails
kinda
really
feeds into
nicely,
it.
it fits
Yeah.
into it.
Mhm.
Because when we're looking at a situation, we are going to be having an emotional response.
Mhm.
We talked about those primary and secondary emotions, and we're going to talk about them in more detail in an upcoming episode. But understanding that as I am processing my feelings, I have to do them based on the reality of what happened.
Right.
Because when we're looking at our emotions, they love to tell us a story, right?
Mhm.
And our emotions are going to step into a situation and they're going to color in all of the lines, right? Because
Mhm.
our brain likes a full picture. Our brain does not like gaps. So as we're looking at the facts of what happened, our emotions come in and give us context. And they're going to be based on what our experiences are,
Mhm.
those filters that we have that are going to then give us a way of responding to what's happened in that moment. Now, if we're trying to determine facts versus feelings, facts are going to be the details of what happened. So, in the example that I gave previously, the fact is that I shared information with a friend, friend A, and I shared detailed private information with friend A.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Mhm.
A fact is friend B then made me aware of what friend A shared from a confidential conversation.
Yes.
Those are the facts of what happened. Now I take these facts and I process them. And this is where the emotions come in. I'm now having feelings about what happened in that moment. And that feeling of betrayal, which then led to anger, that now are coloring in how I respond to this situation.
Right.
So when I'm looking at the facts are that a confidence was betrayed. That is something that I absolutely need to forgive. Now, the emotions add color to that forgiveness.
Mhm.
How deep are those emotions? How much am I impacted or am I affected by what the facts are now presenting?
Mhm.
Because as I'm making the decision to acknowledge this offense, I've got to understand what happened and I have to understand what I feel about what happened. And that's going to lead us into the next step in the forgiveness model. And that is identifying the emotions. And we're going to talk about
Yeah.
that in the next episode. But as I am understanding the facts, I am acknowledging what happened and I'm dealing with what happened in this instance. And I'm considering the invitation to go back and deal with anything from the past that this reminds me of.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I can find so many different ways that all of this just applies so much to me. And I think one of the things we were speaking about in a previous episode was like that color, or not color wheel, the feelings wheel.
Yes.
And how there's primary, secondary, tertiary
Hmm. Hmm.
emotions that all kind of feed into how you are processing, like you were saying, like coloring in
Hmm.
that scenario. Like the facts are black and white,
Yeah.
but we use our emotions to color it in.
Yeah.
And I want to talk for a second about the danger of sharing the hurt
Mm.
before it's resolved. And I'll give this example. There was someone in my life who I have a great relationship with them. They we have kind of a joking, kind of fun relationship. They are a little above me in my daily activities. Like they're the one who I kind of report to a little bit, but we have a very jokey relationship, very brother sister type relationship. And this person was having a, I think, bad day, or maybe they were struggling through a personal leadership struggle, and something I joked about with them that on a typical day would have been totally fine ended up getting a very strong reaction from
Mm,
them. It hurt me, embarrassed me. I was like, this is severing my relationship with this person. I don't even want to interact with them anymore. Um, and it killed my joy in the
mm.
moment. I was trying to be joyful and fun and happy, and that just totally killed my joy. And I was walking around and people were asking me, "Are you okay?" And I so badly wanted to just confide in somebody, because I think we have that nagging feeling to just be like, "I just need to get this off my chest," or
Mhm.
"I just need to vent about this," or whatever. But something in me was telling me, "Hey, just wait and pause and process through your emotions in this before you make a decision." Um, on tarnishing that person's reputation a little bit too. And it turned out within 5 minutes, that person came up to me and was like, "Hey, that was not okay of me. I'm really sorry for treating you that way. There's nothing I could do." And I waited the whole time. I waited for that person to say, "But you did this," or "I just felt this way," or "I've been going," no excuses were made. No, "You should have done this." And I thought to myself, I am so glad that I didn't go bad mouthing this person to all these other people
Yes.
who know this person, because that probably wouldn't have ended up well for anybody involved. And then I'm embarrassed because, I've just tarnished that person's reputation, and then they totally turned it all around within 5 minutes.
Yes.
So I think, like, there is a danger with opening up to people about this, and we have to be careful about who we share a hurt with. Because I think a lot of times we will convince ourselves that we're processing an
Yes.
emotion, verbally processing, but really we're actually making it harder to recover from it.
Yes. Okay. So many good things in there.
Yeah.
So many good things. So first off, another gold star. Awesome. Because in this, it's really important to understand that you hadn't really formulated what the offense was yet.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
Because now you've just have feelings
Right.
and you know how it made you feel. You understood what happened to some degree, and that desire to want to be heard and to share, it's a real one. But we have to give ourselves time to understand what we're experiencing,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
We can sometimes jump the gun and we can move faster than is healthy for us or good and productive for the situation.
Mhm.
So being able to take a moment, just take a beat, just take a step back, deal with the feelings and sort of process what happened so you can understand. Now, there are, some of us who have safe relationships with people who we can go to and we can process and say, "Hey, am I seeing this correctly?" Right? Am I dealing with this? Am I managing this correctly? If you have a counselor or a coach who you work with, that's a wonderful safe place to be able to share in objectivity. But many times, because we've been hurt, we can step into a place where we can attack someone's character. We can move in a way that we can assign and make an accusation that isn't based on the totality of that relationship.
Yeah.
This person was having a bad day, they were
Yeah.
having a bad moment. So, your willingness to stop and say, "I got to deal with what I'm feeling with, I need to process this." And I've got to not move forward in assassinating their character because you have experience with this person, right?
Mhm.
So that's a wonderful grace based response to the situation.
Yeah.
But you also said something important about being able to go process those feelings. So sometimes using a voice journal or actually writing it out, being able to get those emotions out in a safe place so
Mhm.
that you don't allow them to build up inside is really, really important. But you had the benefit of dealing with someone who was mature enough to come back to you quickly
Yeah.
and to make that right. But you still have to forgive them.
Even in that moment when they were trying to come up to me, I found myself, I was standing in a specific place, and they walked up to me, and I intentionally walked away because I was like, I don't want to deal with this person right now. I was so upset with them. And they called my name, and I knew in that moment, I was like recalling from our conversations, and I was
Yeah.
like, Renatha would tell me to forgive. And so in that moment, I had to make that instant decision to quickly forgive,
Yeah.
because I didn't know what was going to be said. I didn't know if he I didn't know if they were going to apologize or if they were going to try to defend themselves or if they were going to tell me another thing I was doing wrong. I wanted and I even noticed in the way I was interacting, I had my arms crossed at first. I was like,
Yeah.
"Yes." But then I realized that and I was like, "Change body language." I
Yeah.
need to be cuz this is closed.
Yes.
I need to be open to this conversation. And what happened was I let them finish their entire line of thinking because I wanted to hear what their intention was, what their heart was behind that conversation. But then I asked an important question. I said, "Can I have the space to respond?"
Yes.
And I think that that's something that we often miss because maybe in an emotionally immature moment, I might have said, "Well, you did blah, blah, blah. And that really hurt me because blah, 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 blah." Sometimes a person knows they need to apologize, but they themselves are not fully ready to receive your response.
Mm.
And so asking, "Is now an okay time for me to share? Or would you like to revisit this later?"
Yeah.
Um, and then what was great about that conversation was that person was emotionally mature enough to hear what I had to say and was like, "Yes, I'm willing to hear the ways that I affected you."
Yes.
And so it was a really great example of how we all kind of had to forgive each other and get on the same page. But ultimately, that relationship was able to be restored because of forgiveness and because of a willingness to listen and understand how each party had offended each other.
And so I love this real life example so much
Yeah.
because this is a picture of what conflict management in a
Yes.
healthy, productive way looks
Yes.
like.
Mhm.
Because, of course, part of you just wants it to go away. You
Mhm.
don't want to have the conversation. You don't want to be reminded of what you were feeling in that moment.
Yeah.
But look what it produced. It
Yes.
produced an opportunity for both of you to come together, to share what you were feeling, to be heard, to be validated, to come to some level of resolution so that you can move forward in a much more healthy environment and relationship.
Yeah.
And now, even in this, whatever happens in the future, you have experience with this person to know that if they respond in a way that you perceive as negative, that they have the ability to look at and then respond in a way that can lead to healing and restoration. So
Wow.
this is awesome. I love this example, but here's the other truth. In this time that we've been having these podcasts, you yourself have now become a more forgiving person.
Yes.
That is the benefit of engaging with this material,
Yeah.
engaging with this topic. It starts to move in your life so that you then begin to see it and to use it as a catalyst to affect your relationships in real time. So
Yeah.
this is really exciting. Thank you so much for sharing that example.
Yeah, absolutely. And as much as I would love to say that I am perfect and I would absolutely have handled that situation no matter what that person did, I do kind of feel like if they hadn't apologized, we would be looking at a little bit of a different situation.
Yeah, of
And I
course.
might be sitting here trying to use you for life coaching because I didn't know how to forgive that offense
Yeah.
because that person came to me and asked for forgiveness. But what if they didn't?
Yeah.
And I think if that person had kind of been interacting with me in that way and kind of assumed that that was just a forgiven offense because we were in a loving setting and we have a that kind of relationship, it doesn't need to be addressed. And I'm now walking around carrying the 100 pounds of that offense. What do I do in the instance of that person hasn't asked for forgiveness, but I
Yeah.
still need to forgive them?
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
I think some of that is just kind of walking through and acknowledging the offense and maybe myself initiating the conversation. But again, it's just one of those things that needs to be addressed and forgiven even though it's, you know, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm tracking with you. So, because understand that none of us are gonna do it perfectly.
Yeah.
Like, we're all learning and growing. We're all stepping into situations where we have to manage this in a different way. And as we acknowledge the offense, there's this invitation for us now to look at it, to consider it, so that we can move forward in the most healthy and healing way that we can.
Yeah. That's so beautiful, and I think that that's just an incredible segue into our next step of forgiveness, which is what we're going to be talking about next episode. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of The Healing Habit. We just want to remind you that if you are in a place where you're wanting to dive a little bit deeper into forgiveness and into healing, we have some important links in the description down below that can also get you some professional help if you're looking for that as well. But unfortunately, we are out of time for this episode. So, again, thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Healing Habit. Tune in for next episode where we're going to be talking about
Identifying emotions.
identifying emotions, which I'm excited about because I just think that that's the perfect segue. But yeah, thanks so much for listening. Again, I'm your host, Cassie,
And I'm Renatha.
and we will see you on the next episode.